What is going on, everybody? Bobby Fi here. Sheets is not going to be around today, so I'm going to um, be doing this alone. He will be around this evening for the live show, and um, anyway, hold on one second. Sorry, this is all right. So I'm gonna get into this slate and go through it. Sorry about that. I had a little distraction. Anyway, I had an okay night last night. It wasn't anything ideal. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. But it wasn't quite what I wanted to do. A lot of my plays didn't quite work out for me. Some of them did. It's one of those nights, and we're back at it again tonight to talk about this slate. So let's get into it. All right, here we go. All right, so let's start off with Philadelphia and Toronto. Obviously, like with Philadelphia lately, I keep pointing out that they did finally raise Grimes' price. I still think that this is like too low of a projection. Now we'll see about Oubre being out. That'll obviously boost it a little bit. We'll see about Drummond as well. So still waiting on some news, obviously. But as of right now, Lonnie Walker looking still like a very reasonable play at 4,300. Jared Butler at 4,400 looks reasonable to me. But there is other value on the slate that probably stands out just a little bit better. And we did just see this matchup the other day. But I'm open to the Philly thing, but nobody who stands out as like must plays or anything like that. However, on the other side, we saw the massive game out of AJ Lawson. Going to be hard to ignore that at just 4K. They did bump his price up a little bit, not nearly enough. Jared Roden also would be somebody else to consider. And I think that Scotty Barnes at lowish ownership is pretty interesting, but obviously you still have to wait on Battle and Barnes early in the day, so hard to know exactly where to go with that. Anyway, we can move on to Charlotte, Atlanta, and I am confused at why there's not ownership yet, but I guess it's probably just because it's early in the morning. I think Daquan Jeffries is mildly interesting, and it's such a premium matchup. I think we got to consider LaMelo, but the one I want to highlight here is Miles Bridges. Bridges has been absolutely awesome, and they haven't raised his price enough. He's putting up like 50 plus every game. I think he's one guy I plan on trying to go out of my way to get a little later and just hope the game stays close. I think this could turn into a little bit of a game stack as a place to spend with Bridges and LaMelo on one side, and you've got value elsewhere, so we can afford it. And I think you can, we have Trae Young at, sort of a weird number here. I actually think this number will be higher if we know he's playing, but I think that Trae Young is totally viable tonight, and that's where I'm at as of right now, whether LeVert plays or not. Obviously, if these guys don't play again, we can go back to some of the thinner value plays, but I don't know that we're going to need as much of it. Dyson Daniels would stand out quite a bit. I think he's reasonable anyway. So obviously, again, first looks, it's always going to be hard to figure out. And the Kongwu, I think, makes a lot of sense as well. At 7,100, still feels very affordable considering how much he's dominated and how Bigs have dominated Charlotte this season. OKC and Boston, best real game of the night, potential finals preview. Shea in close games, everybody knows I like him, so I will go out of my way to get myself some Shea. I also am open to the idea, especially with like no Jalen Williams, I'm open to the idea of trying to get to Chet, but I would need to see these minutes be like closer to 30. If we don't have him on a minutes restriction, I think Chet is extremely interesting as a contrarian play. And things, as you can see, are still updating. It's early in the day. But I think Chet would be like an interesting contrarian from that game that I would certainly consider. Boston on the other side, and I'm seeing that there's updates and must be some news breaking in that I haven't quite caught up with yet. Kristaps is at shoot around, Tatum and Brown at shoot around, Jalen Williams, no timetable. Trae Young is at shoot around. Okay. I missed that little note earlier. So Boston, obviously, assuming that all these guys play, I don't think there's anybody I'm going out of my way to play in against a tough defensive team. Drew Holiday is cheap enough where you could consider it, but there's just other value out there. Again, though, if anybody sits, as we usually see Boston sitting people, they're not locked into the number 2 seed, but they're pretty close. But this is a big game for them, so I think they might just put all hands on deck. But yeah, definitely open to getting to maybe a Tatum or a Jaylen Brown, but nobody who's a priority. I think there's just too many other plays on this slate. It's kind of a turbo slate too, so it's a little funky. We're gonna late swap pretty quickly right after, and then move on from there because it's only on FanDuel do we have the extra 10 p.m. Eastern games. Plumlee, sure. I actually think Richards is kind of interesting. That low ownership at 4,400. That's probably the route I would go, just considering the ownership gap. And I just think it's interesting. And we have Bradley Beal back tonight, so I'm probably going to stick away from the Devin Booker, Kevin Durant thing. I don't think I want to play Beal either. So probably mostly a cross off for Phoenix. A little bit interested in Richards as a contrarian value. Anyway, so over to the Houston side, Steven Adams. I'm not doing that. I'm not probably doing the Dylan Brooks thing, although it's so cheap. I think you can get this. I'll probably get to some of it, but I'll probably be a little bit below the field. Tari Eason, like quite a bit. And then, as I keep saying, we've got Van Vliet probable today with no Amen Thompson. I want to see if there's a minutes. We have a minutes limit on Van Vliet, because if he's good to go his normal 35, which I think he will be, I think he's kind of interesting. And I think Şengün is kind of interesting as well. So have a little bit of more of interest in the Houston side, although I'm not getting too much from Phoenix at the moment. Utah in Memphis. You've got John Collins, as I mentioned the other day. Like I really liked him, and it depends on if Markkanen and Clarkson are out, even more so. This projection seems a little aggressive, assuming all those guys play, but I still like Collins quite a bit, so he's probably my favorite piece. The other ones, Sexton, I want to wait to see what happens with Clarkson and Markkanen. And just a reminder, it's always tough with Utah because they end up playing a bunch of guys like 20 some odd minutes, a little bit similar to what the Nets do a lot of the nights. But I have some interest here. It's a great pace matchup. I also worry about the blowout, so a little bit concerned there, but I do want to wait to see about Clarkson and Markkanen before I make any further decisions, at least get some info on them. All right, so we've got no Jaren Jackson, no Santi Aldama still. Vince Williams Jr. should be available tonight. He was out last time. I like him at 3,800. He's another piece of the chalk value that I will be signing up for. Always a little nerve-wracking with Memphis because they play a bunch of guys. I think you could use Scottie Pippen at low ownership as a pivot, but Vince Williams definitely somewhat interesting to me. This Zach Edey ownership, I'm not quite sure why it's so high. I liked Zach Edey as a play, but I don't know that I need to play him at this high of ownership. Brandon Clark at lower ownership, a little cheaper, I think is just as interesting. And again, there is some definite blowout risk in this game. John Morant's been great lately. We're starting to see the better side of him. Again, I'm open to it. As of right now, I might be below the field playing the blowout angle. Same with Bane. But I do want to get to the cheaper pieces in this game, and I'm still open to those guys. I just think there's some other spots I want to attack a little bit more. We're going to have no Kawhi, I'm assuming, on the back-to-back. And with no Kawhi, it means we probably are going to play Harden even in a tough matchup at Miami. Back-to-backs on the road, a little bit tough. But Harden and Zubac is not the ideal back-to-back player. But I think Harden and Bogdanovic would be probably my two favorites, with Dunn being third. But I'm not sure really how much I'm going to get to them. I'm going to wait till a little later in the day. The projections level out. We get an idea of who's playing elsewhere before I make my final decisions on that. Miami on the other side, really, really not like hard to get to these guys at this price. I think I could make an argument for Tyler Hero at low ownership. I think I can make an argument for Bam, who's been awesome at low ownership. But I don't think I'm going to go out of my way for any of it. I'm just like open to it as of right now. If I end up with a little bit of it, that's fine, but I'm not going to go way out of my way to play it. Talking about Dallas in San Antonio, Brandon Williams, 4,500 if he plays, I think is interesting. Obviously, Williams, Washington, and Exum being questionable. It's really hard early in the day with Dallas to try and get this. Dinwiddie may end up being one of the best plays on the slate, or you may end up getting none of him if all those guys play. If PJ Washington plays, I'm interested in playing PJ Washington. If Dante Exum is out, I think Christie gets a little bit of a bump, and I think he's fine anyway. Kessler Edwards may end up becoming a thing by the end of the day. Just it's hard to know with not knowing who's playing for Dallas, and honestly, not exactly sure what they're trying to do. Are they going to try and make the play in? We'll see. I can't tell whether they're tanking or not. It's tricky. It's hard to know when you don't have any of your players whether their intent, the team is actually tanking or not. I think they might just be naturally tanking. Devin Vassell feels too cheap for this matchup. Really like him at 6,100. I think Keldon Johnson's a really strong play. I mentioned him the other night at low ownership. He's got higher ownership today, but I still think he's interesting. We haven't seen the massive games as often from Fox as I would have thought. So, but I still think in this matchup, we should at least be considering him. So I'll run a quick build just using the natural stuff. Let's just go, we'll do ownership, and we'll just go to 46, and we'll go to 33, and then we'll run some builds and just see where we're at. While I'm doing that, I'll talk really quickly just about the last 2 games on FanDuel. Let me just get over here real quick. The value is not quite as strong on FanDuel. They did raise the prices a little bit more, but it's still pretty strong with the Sheed, Roden, Lawson combination. But the 10 o'clock games, Minnesota, I think Randall at 7,300 is very reasonable. I like a low-owned Anthony Edwards today. I think this is a spot where they're going to need every bit of it from him. So I do think going out of your way to playing some Edwards on FanDuel is something that is very appealing to me, regardless of whether Rudy plays or not. If Rudy doesn't play, leaving the middle open a little bit more makes it even more appealing. And then we've got Denver coming off the big win at OKC. I like Jokic here. Again, I always like Jokic. It's a matter of where we can get him in. 13,000. Finally, they're pricing him closer to where he should be. He's still a 5x play at 13K basically. So I'm interested there. Westbrook, as assuming that he does in fact start again, I don't know why they would change anything. I do like Westbrook even at 6,300. I think he's still reasonable. Those would be my 2 favorites, followed by Porter, then Braun, then Murray. Murray has put up some ceiling games though, and this is a spot where it's not a great matchup, but when he gets hot, it doesn't really matter, and he goes through these stretches. If you get another game like him, you did from like the other night, obviously you're going to be very happy. New York and Portland. This is an interesting line. I almost felt like I was missing. I know Brunson's out, but I feel like still New York maybe would have been a bigger favorite. I don't know. McBride, even at 5,700, I think is interesting. I'm glad they raised his price, but I think if you want to go cheap, you take a shot with Campaign here. Like, this is a low-owned play that no one's going to use because there's other value. Can you play Campaign in addition to that value and maybe get your 25 out of them? I think you can. Do you need it? Maybe not. That's the only question, really. Cat and Hart are both very strong plays, obviously, with no Brunson. Basically, everybody on the Knicks, we know they play a pretty tight rotation. Kind of want to bump them all up a little bit, maybe even a little more than I thought. Portland on the other side, the one who's projecting well is Scoot. I've loved seeing. I mean, Avdia, like, he's not going to make almost all of his shots again, but I do like Avdia a ton, and I'm very open to going out of my way to get to a little bit of that. And Shaden Sharp, we just know the ceiling is extremely high, even though there's going to be a wide range of outcomes. So let's take a quick look at the first build I did over on DraftKings. I did want to remind everybody, if you're a member, check out the PayDirt tools. We did partner with them in addition to SaberSim. And I think it's really awesome, the offering that we have. We've got some great deals. We did raise a little bit of the prices, just a little bit, but they're going to be raised more because we're paying out a lot trying to get these tools developed, building out our team. And I think we're in a really good spot. So anybody who wants to get in, now might be the time to get in. We're probably not going to do an MLB promo this year because we just are going to have to raise the prices shortly, but this is sort of like the promo time. With MLB coming up, if you want to join, now is probably the time to do it. All right, let's see. We did the builds. Let's run the sims and see where we'd be at as of this morning, which we know will be very different than what we get later today, because obviously it's the NBA, and obviously we are going to get a ton of news. So let's just see where we're at the moment before we do anything. All right, let's see where we're at here. And any questions or thoughts, please pop them on in, but also like and subscribe, all that stuff. But I do really think that we've got an incredible offering, and I would hope people would be checking it out. We do have a trial. You guys can jump on in and check that out. We have a trial for the Ultimate at $14.99. I think it's pretty awesome, and it'll give you, 3 days of absolutely everything that we have. And I think it's worth checking out. Yeah, you can see LaMelo. All these guys are projecting really well. The one that I'm curious about was where Bridges would fall. They got him at 22. I think I'm going to end up with a ton of Bridges tonight, just knowing I see what's going on with him, and he has a monster ceiling. And in that matchup, I think that's going to be one of the guys I'm probably in the 50% range on, depending on how the injuries and whatnot fall. I would be under this with Edie by the end of the day. I'll be under this on Brandon Williams. Well, I'll probably be right with this on Brandon Williams, actually. Ja, I'm okay with, but I don't know that I'm going to have 35%. Vince Williams, I do like that. I might even go a little bit higher on him. Probably going to wait to see on Utah what to do with John Collins, but I still think he's a solid play no matter what. Even if those guys are in, if they're out, he's going to be like 1,000,000% owned, and we have to make some decisions then. I think we get to argue for playing more Harden. It is a back-to-back, and they're in Miami, but it's not ideal. You don't love Harden on a back-to-back in Miami. That's a little bit of a scary situation, and many of you guys who follow the NBA know exactly what I'm talking about. However, with no Kawhi and obviously no Norman Powell still, it's just hard not to take some, shots with Harden and assume that he's just going to get all the usage in the world along with Zubac. In fact, who else is getting the usage over there? Bogdanovich will eat up some, I guess, but I would probably prioritize Harden a little bit higher. I'd probably prioritize Bogdanovich a little bit higher. So that's sort of a quick look of what we're looking at from a first take standpoint. Again, like and subscribe. We'll be live at 6:30 Eastern time to do a live before lock. I remind everybody I get out of there about 20, 25 minutes, and then I go into our premium Discord and go through exactly what I'm doing on every slate for the subs. And hopefully everybody finds it useful. And yeah, check out what the package is. And good luck to everybody today. Hope you guys crush it.